Recently, I did a video where I was explaining some shell commands, and one of the commands I did was the append command, where you append a line of text to the end of a file. And this is a basic kind of shell operator here, where you can do something like echo a line of text. And then you do the two right-pointing chevrons, right? The two greater than signs, and then some file name, and then file name, if it exists and already has text in it, we don't overwrite it because the two right-pointing chevrons doesn't overwrite. It appends this line of text to the end. It's the last line of text in that file. For example, I have a test file here on the system. Let me cat test, and you can see the last line here is enter the text to append here. Now, if I wanted to, I could echo this is now the last line, and then the two right pointing chevrons, and then test. And now when I cat test, you can see I've appended that line of text. This is now the last line to the end of the file. Now on that video, I got the comment, hey, why isn't there a similar easy function, easy way to prepend a line to the beginning of a file? We've got append, how about prepend? And there's no simple way to prepend a line of text to a file. It gets a little more complicated, but it's just a little more complicated. But one of the things you can do is anytime you have a problem on Linux, right? What's the solution? Well, bash scripting is typically the solution. So why don't we create a simple bash script that allows us to easily prepend a line of text to the beginning of a file? In fact, why don't we do two bash scripts today? Why don't we create an append bash script and a prepend bash script? One for appending a line of text to the end of a file, and one for prepending a line of text to the beginning of a file. And these will be really simple bash scripts. They're going to use some basic core utility functions that, if you're new to bash scripting, just follow along. These will be really easy. So first, let's start with the append, because this will be the easiest one, because all it involves is the two right pointing chevrons to a file name. So this will be a dead simple bash script, but we'll add some fancy stuff to it. So the way I want this to work is I want to have this script called append, and I want to be able to run append space file name, and then whatever file I give it, it's going to give me a prompt. I enter a line of text into the prompt, and it appends that line of text to the file name. That's the way I want this to work. So what do I first need to do? Well, the first thing you need to do in any bash script is actually add the shebang. So you need to do the crunch bang slash, and then user/bin/env space bash. That is your bash shebang. Now, because I want this script to be run with append and then, name a file, I need to make sure that the user has to enter a file name. If he tries to run append without a file name, I need it to error out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an if statement to take care of this. So this particular if statement, the very first line is just a comment. All comments in bash scripting begin with the hashtag, the pound sign, right? And I'm just leaving a note here so you know exactly what this block of code here, right? What does this do? Well, it checks if a file name argument is provided. So the way this works is this if statement, if $ and then hash symbol. So $ hash symbol signifies the number of command line arguments. So I'm asking if the number of command line arguments is not equal to 1, then do something. And I want you to echo basically an error message. And I want to tell the user, hey, dummy, you can't just use append by itself. You have to give append an argument. You have to append file name, right? And then I want you to exit the script if we get the error message. And let's go ahead and write this and actually see if this works. So I'm going to write and quit out of that, and let me chmod 755 our append script. That way it executes, and now I can /append to run the script, and I'm not going to give it a file name. And because I didn't give it a file name, it errors out, right? It exits, but it gives us this message before it exits. It says usage append file name. And if I'd given it a file name, then it would continue with the rest of the script. Of course, we didn't give it a rest of a script, right? Because we didn't tell it what to do if I do give it a file name. So let's go ahead and finish the rest of the script. So the first thing I want to do is I want then if we give it a file name, I want to use a read prompt. So a read prompt in Bash is just a user prompt. It's just going to ask us for user input where I type a line of text that will eventually get appended to the file. So we could do something like, well, first let's create a variable. I can do file name equals and then $1. So $1 is the argument, the first argument we give to a command. So if I go append and then name a file in this case is $1, and I'm assigning that this variable name, file name, that we can reuse here in just a second. And then what I want to do is I want to echo enter text to, well, if I can type, append to file, and then I want you to repeat the file name. That way we make sure we know exactly what file we're appending the text to. I'll add a colon at the end as well to that line of text. And then we need to give our read prompt, which is read, and you need to use these flags here, -E, -R, -P. The -P is for prompt, and then we need to specify what prompt we want, and the prompt can be just a single right pointing chevron, and write a single greater than sign, and I'll do a space behind it. And then we need to assign a variable name for the user input from the read prompt, and I'm going to call it input_text. And then what we want after we enter our input_text into the prompt, what do we do with that text? Well, we append it to the file. So we need to echo $input_text. And then we need to do the two right pointing chevrons for the append function, right? And where do we need to append it to? Well, we need to append it to $file name, which is, of course, our argument that we gave at the command line, right? With append, name of file, that's $1, which is really file name now because it's the variable we assign, and that's what we're writing our input text to, or appending our input text to. And then as a confirmation, just to make sure we know the script successfully completed, let's also echo out text successfully appended. And then how about an exclamation, right? Now, this should work for us. So let's write and quit. And now let's, once again, /append. And if I don't give it a file name, of course it errors out, but let's give it a file name this time. Let's append a line of text to the test file. And now we get our prompt, our read prompt, right? Enter text to append to file. And then the read prompt is that single greater than sign followed by a space, and then I enter something. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I hit enter, we get text successfully appended. If I cat test, and then you can see we just added a new line at the end, right? We appended that line to the end of that file. So this is a very, very simple little script. Matter of fact, I could clean it up a little bit. For one thing, I'm probably going to push this to my GitLab for those that want to use this as an example script, but I'm going to add some comments to it. For one thing, the read prompt, what does -E, -R, -P do? I talked about P. It is your prompt. The -E flag is to get user input with read line support, and the -R is preventing / escapes from being interpreted. So this is your standard read prompt that you'll use all the time in Bash scripting. I'll also add a comment down here as well, just to make sure you know what this is doing. This, of course, is the actual append function, right? We're echoing the user input over into file name. One of the things I often do with my scripts is, of course, I have some comments and some information about my GitLab. Also, if there's a license associated with the script. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add my standard comments. I always add this kind of block of comments to my Bash scripts. I also add this function here, the set-euo pipe fail, and this is just for debugging, just for a safety check here. But here at the top, I'm going to call the script append. So I give a script name, I give a description of what it does. This is a Bash script for appending a line of text to a file, and the dependencies, just your standard GNU core utils. And then GitLab, I'm going to create a repository. I haven't created it already, but it will be over on my GitLab. I'm going to call this mini utils. Kind of like core utils. This will be mini utils. So just simple little utility scripts written in Bash. And then, of course, there will be a license associated with it. I typically license all of my stuff under the GPL v3. So there will be the location of the license once I create the GitLab for this. Now, one thing about this script that I don't like as is, if I rerun the script and append the test file, I do not like the plain prompt. I don't like the single greater than sign, so let me Control C to exit out of that. And I think I'm going to create a fancier prompt. For one thing, instead of the 1 greater than sign, how about 3 greater than signs? That way, you know, it's more visually striking, right? It's obvious that that's a prompt, right? We're being prompted for something. But I think I should add some color to it as well. And one of the ways to add some color is with the tput function. So I'm going to create a couple of variable names here. I'm going to use the colors purple and green from my terminal color scheme. So I'm going to create a variable here called purple, and in the side quotations, I'm going to set this to run this command: tput set AF, which is the foreground color of your terminal, right? The font color. I'm going to set that to color 5 and bold. So I'm going to make the text purple in this case. That's what my color 5 is. And I also want that text to be bold. And then what I want to do is I want to do the same thing, except I want to have a function here for a green color, and that is color 2. So the same tput command, tput set AF to bold. And then I need to have a reset command as well, because if I just use this variable, like the purple variable or the green variable, everything in my terminal after that will be set to that color. I need to reset it back to factory settings, if you will. So I'm also going to create this function, and it's going to be set to the command tput sgr0, and that resets everything back to the standard terminal font settings. So first, I think I want the prompt here, right, to be a different color. I want that to be that purple bold color. So I'm going to do $, and then inside the braces here, purple, and then we get the prompt, and then I want the prompt to actually reset after that, because I want my input text, what I actually type, to just be normal, plain white text, and not bold, right? So here is where I need to do the reset. And then let me write and quit that and run the function and see if that works. It does. We get our prompt, right? That's now purple and bold. And if I start typing, you know, we reset back to normal font settings after that. I'm going to Control C to get out of that. But one other addition I want to make is I also want the file name here to be that same bold purple color. So let's add purple there and then reset it to get back to our normal font after that. And if I write and quit that, just to make sure that that worked, yeah, enter text to file test, and you can see the file name is now bold, so it stands out, and then the prompt also stands out. And then I would append something, for example, another line to append, and then I get text successfully appended, except I want the success to stand out as well. So what I want to do is I want to add a Unicode checkmark somewhere along the way. So I could go into my web browser, and what I could do is I could find a Unicode checkmark. So let me switch to a different workspace, pull up my web browser here and type Unicode checkmark. And here we go. Very first result, copy that. And now what I could do is let me go back into my file here and then paste that check mark into the file, except I want the check mark to be green and bold. It needs to be green because it's a check, right? Green obviously is associated with success, right? The green check mark, and a red X would be associated with a failure, but I'm not going to create a failure message here. So let's go ahead and color it with $, and then again the braces, and this time this will be green, and then after the check mark we need to do a quick reset. And then I want a space between the green check mark and then the rest of the text. And if I write and quit out of that, and once again run append, name of file, again we'll append the test file, we get the purple coloring on the file name and the prompt. One more line to test this test! Exclamation. And then I get the green bold check mark, the Unicode check mark, and text successfully appended. So I think that is good enough. I think that is a nice little append bash script. Now let's do one for prepend. So what are we going to do with prepend? Well, we're basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a big copy and paste of append, except I'm going to change just a couple of things over to prepend. And you guys won't have to watch me do the quick copy and paste, but I'll be back in just a second. So I just copied the append script over into a new script, into a new file called prepend, right? So I just changed a couple of things here, but for the most part, it's the same thing. When I run the prepend bash script, it needs to accept a file name, right? And if it doesn't have a file name, then you're going to exit, right? We're going to get an error message. And then the same thing with the same colors, purple, green, and reset. File name equals $1, and then the same kind of prompt, right? Basically, everything is the same except, this section here was where the text would get appended, right, in the append script. But now we're prepending text. How do we accomplish that? Well, the first thing we do is we run the make temp command. So what is make temp? It's one of the standard core utils. It makes a temporary file on the system. So it's just it creates a temporary file that you do something with temporarily. So, and we're going to set that to a variable. I'm going to call it temp file. And then what are we going to do with this temporary file we created? Well, whatever input text from the read prompt, whatever I enter as text, I want you to print our input text over into temp file, right? It writes input text over into the temp file that's created. And printf does %s and then the new line break. So it adds a line break after input text. That's very important to make sure that our line of text has a line break before the rest of the text in the file. So now we've got our one line of text that we enter in a temporary file. But how do we get that to be prepended to file name? Well, you use the standard cat command. You cat file name and append it to the temporary file. So now our temporary file has the text we need. It's our one line of text at the beginning plus everything from the original file. So that's all good. And then all we need to do after that is move temp file into file name. Basically, it's a copy, right? It takes temp file, which is now everything right, our prepended text and everything, and copy that over into file name, overriding the original file. And then finally, we echo, once again, a bold green check mark, text successfully prepended in this case instead of appended, right? Pretty simple scripts, these append and prepend scripts. Now I need to, once again, I need to chmod. In this case, I need to chmod this prepend script, and let's see if this works. So let's prepend a line of text to the test file. And let's go ahead and, in the beginning, there was bash, exclamation, and text successfully prepended. Let's cat test to actually see if that is true. And the very first line is in the beginning, there was bash. And then, of course, then it copies everything over after that and then concatenates the whole thing into our file name, into test. So that is a very simple function. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save append and prepend. I'm going to go ahead and upload these over into my GitLab. So let me actually go to my GitLab and create a new repository for all of this. So my GitLab is gitlab.com/dwt1, and I'm going to go ahead and let's create a new repository. So I had to log in there. Let me hit the plus sign here and let's do a new project /repository and then create a, we'll create a blank project. This project name, I'm going to call it Mini Utils, and it will be public access, initialized with a README, sure, and then create project. And then I need to pick a group or namespace because I have a couple of different ones. I'm going to use DWT1, my username. So it'll be gitlab.com/dwt1/miniutils, create project. And the project was created. And now I need to clone this on my system. I'm going to clone with SSH. So let me copy that and then get back over here into the terminal. I'm going to CD into where I have all of my GitLab repos. And then I'm going to git clone and then the SSH address there for the Git repository. And now if I do an ls in here, I now have a new GitLab repository called Miniutils. Let's cd into Miniutils, do an ls. There is a readme.markdown. I will probably replace that with a readme.org file at some point, but I'm not going to bother writing a readme right this second. But I do want to copy over the append and prepend files over into this repository. So let me go ahead and copy from my home directory append over into this directory. Now, if I do an ls, there is append, and let me up arrow, and now I will do the same thing for prepend. And ls, and there are those files. Let me add them. So I'm going to git add append and prepend. If I do a git status, you can see new file, all of that. So let's go ahead and git commit in the message, and this will be initial push, because this is the very first time I'm pushing anything to that repo, and then git push. And now if I get back over into my GitLab, you can see now these are live online, and you guys can go and grab those if you want to use them, especially if you're new to bash scripting and want to see how these scripts work. Now you can go play with them, and it's really easy. If you're new to how Git works, make sure Git is installed on your system, and you need to go get the Git address and then do a simple Git clone. So there you have it, some very easy, simple little bash scripting. Now, before I go, I need to thank a few special people. I need to thank the producers of this episode: Matt, Steve, 40mm, Cap, Caveman, Darlow, Lee, Jersey Killer, Mark, Methos, Ariane, Paul, Peace, Arch, and Fedora, Realities for Less, Red Prophet, Roland, Wargento, and Ubuntu, and Willie. These guys, they're my highest tiered patrons over on Patreon. Without these guys, this little episode about bash scripting would not have been possible. The show's also brought to you by each and every one of these fine ladies and gentlemen as well. All these names you're seeing on the screen right now, these are all my supporters over on Patreon. Because I don't have any corporate sponsors, I'm sponsored by you guys, the community. If you like my work and want to see more videos about Linux and free and open source software and bash scripting, subscribe to DistroTube over on Patreon. Peace, guys.